Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us again. And I'm very excited to have as our guest, Matt Thompson, Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at Soprano. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Great to have you. So we're going to talk about patient engagement. We're going to engage in patient engagement. What I would love to know at the top is what healthcare organizations in the U.S. healthcare delivery system have been doing lately to address patient engagement from your viewpoint?
Well, we've seen a big change in the way healthcare has to be delivered in the context of the pandemic. Obviously, a lot of us have experienced more telehealth appointments. There have been some pretty good advancements in the way that some of these bigger systems like MyCharts have been incorporated into all the operations of patient interactions, and so there's been some good improvements. But just generally speaking, we're still just interacting, with our doctors and specialists, not that differently than before the pandemic. There's been attempts to move us forward, but we're still generally doing the same thing that we were before.
What are the biggest challenges right now in shifting that, Matt? What are hospitals, medical groups, and health systems not doing that they could be doing, and what are the obstacles in their way right now?
Well, there's a lot of technology that's now become available. So we've been able to move to, for example, video conferencing, like what we're doing right now, and it's almost like the hard part is the easy part, because doing a video conference is obviously the latest advancement in overall technology. But just turning that video conference on for a patient and doctor interaction is just one part of a whole sequence of things that needs to happen in the overall engagement between ourselves as patients and ourselves as doctors. So, and that's just in the context of telehealth. The same could be said about an appointment that you might have where, once you're at the doctor's office, that appointment will happen. But the engagement between yourself and the organization or yourself and the doctor happens a lot before and a lot after. So where we're getting a few things right is that we've got new things available to us, new technology like video, but it's way ahead of where we're at on the overall communication interaction that's happening between doctors and patients.
And one of the things that we keep hearing is that there's a lack of strategy. It's anyone can turn on the technology, and of course, technology is important. We need it. We need it as a fundamental element. But what we're learning in our reporting is that so often the leaders of patient care organizations don't really have a strategy. There's no, it's just like, well, we need to engage someone in some way, right? And they're kind of crawling along in a dark room. Whereas, and I know that your organization is very involved in this, what patient care organization leaders really need to do is say, okay, what do we want? We want A, B, and C. What are A, B, and C? They have to define what those things are. And then they have to architect their processes to achieve those. Is that correct?
Yeah. I hesitate to accuse these organizations of not having a strategy at all, because there's quite a lot of thinking that's probably going into moving from, let's say, in-person to telehealth. There's probably quite a lot of strategy involved in enabling something like MyCharts to be more part of everything that they're doing. But where they might be going wrong is sort of not looking at what is available in all of the places that they could be communicating. So, for example, 85% or more of the healthcare professionals are already either carrying a tablet or a smartphone. They want to use it for communicating with patients, and solving for the preferences of the healthcare professionals and solving for the preferences of the patients involved is probably one piece of their strategy that they might not be getting right. And the I think the overall problem is that there's not a lot of thinking going into the communication that's involved in all of this when the strategy is being rolled out. So the strategy might be, we need to move to I'm just going to use something basic for illustration. We have an imperative to move to telemedicine because there's a law preventing us from seeing patients in person, which is what was happening back in March of 2020. So they didn't have a choice. Strategy is easy in that situation, but they might not be engaging their best thinkers when it comes to user experience and engagement. Communication professionals, even psychology can play a part in how people feel about the overall process. So it's sort of a way. It's maybe more tactical than strategy.
Okay. What happens? What are the impacts when there's ineffective patient engagement, when patients aren't engaged?
It's a lot about how people feel. And this can happen on both the patient side and on the doctor side. So if, for example, people get confused about what they should be doing, or if people get into a situation where they're unable to do it because they weren't given proper instructions, or just the instructions didn't make sense to them, all of those things add up to the way that they feel about the overall interaction. And by the time, just like what you and I are doing here, by the time you're in the meeting, things can be going just great as far as the technology goes, but neither one of us might feel very good about what's happening because it might have started late. It might have had a lot of stress involved, and that just compounds the stress that people already have when they're in a patient doctor situation. They're already sort of here from a stress level, and then we bring them to here because we're not communicating very well, and that just doesn't go very well. So it's a lot about the emotions involved. And there's quite a lot that we could be doing better to prepare people for those interactions.
Absolutely. So what does this look like in the future? What does real patient engagement, what does authentic patient engagement look like in a couple of years? How is that going to shake out?
I think if we could imagine a future where it's easier to engage with technology than it is to engage in person, and that there's really go big with our vision of the future, that you could still have a human connection through these technologies. That's the ultimate goal, because just like what we were just talking about a second ago, the way people feel really has a lot to do with how they the way people feel in these interactions has a lot to do with how they feel about the organizations they're interacting with. And if we lose that human connection, then we're not going to actually end up, they're not going to be loyal to us as organizations. So I think that the way that it goes in the future is that you know what to do. So you know where to go, or who you're going to be talking to, you know how to prepare. You show up, everything works, it starts on time, it ends on time, and you've actually saved time or saved hassle because you didn't have to drive across town, and you got the same kind of human interaction as you had always been expecting.
Yeah, exactly. And so what are some of the steps that patient care organization leaders can take now to begin to build towards that future?
I think organizations need to take a look at what the data is telling us and what both patients and doctors are telling us. There's a lot of frustration that is involved with appointments, meetings, doctor-patient interactions, handoffs between one specialist to another, and to just really study what the data is telling us is that it's about people not knowing what to do and people feeling lost and frustrated. The NIH says that there's $12 billion lost annually just from communication problems alone in hospitals. And if we could actually fix this problem, we could have better clinical outcomes. We could have better retention, fewer malpractice suits. $12 billion a year is a big number, and it's low hanging fruit because there's technology out there today that could address some of these problems.
Exactly. Do you feel optimistic? I mean, I'll do the scale of 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic do you feel that patient care organizations will be meaningfully ahead of where they are right now overall on patient engagement in a few years?
I'm optimistic. I'm an optimist, so it's hard for me to sort of take the pessimistic view. I think that it always moves a little bit slower than it could. There's a world in which we could be living right now where things would be going better because the technology is all there, and it's some organizations are doing things better than others. So if we were all kind of on that same level already, we'd be already seeing some of this. But yeah, I think that what we're going to start to see that will really drive this is that patients will, since we don't all just interact with one healthcare organization, as patients, we interact with many. And once we start experiencing a good outcome and a good engagement, we'll start demanding that from the other organizations that we interact with. And that demand will probably drive a better outcome.
Exactly. Final pieces of advice, any explicit advice you'd like to give to our audience?
What we're saying to the customers that we're talking to is bring in the vendors and the technology providers that know how this could be done better earlier in the process. So when we're working on digital transformation projects to peel apart something and put something in new. Telehealth is what's been happening for the last couple of years, but there's all kinds of other initiatives inside of healthcare organizations that are going to be hard. Bring in the experts early to explore all of the options that are available and to look forward into the future. Don't be thinking about what's been done. Think about what could be done in the future and set yourself up with something that's future-proof. That's one big thing to do. That's sort of like bringing in the right providers, but then bring the right talent from within your own organization to that conversation. So all those people that are UI experts on your website, all those people that are UI or interact patient experts on how patients feel about how they interact. Bring in these people that you've hired to help these interactions go better into these conversations early and get them all in the room thinking and brainstorming and really kind of scope out and use design thinking and scope out a better experience and think about how people feel while you're doing this. I think if those simple things were done, just getting the right people involved and focusing on emotions, a lot of good things can come from that.
Absolutely. It's almost become a mantra among healthcare IT people about people, process, and technology, but the people part has to come first.
Yeah.
Everything else follows out.
Yeah, we all been there, right? So it's not too much of a stretch for us to imagine how people feel. It's just that the technology sometimes gets a little bit technical, and we start to lose sight of what's most important.
Which is the people.
Which is the people, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom today, Matt. It's been great to speak with you, and I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you to you and our audience for participating. This concludes this session. Thank you.